Hey, what's going on guys? Today we're going to be doing another Skyrim challenge. It's actually been quite some time since I attempted one of these. Today's challenge was actually viewer suggested, and it's can you beat Skyrim with only pickpocketing items and maybe do the same in Fallout? Well, I don't know about Fallout, but I haven't done a Skyrim challenge in quite some time, so I thought I'd try it first on Skyrim. I will say beforehand, I don't think combat's going to be too much of an issue here. The biggest problem I'm going to have is with survival mode, but let's discuss the rules. So, rule 1 is that I can only use pickpocketed items. This includes things like weapons, armor, food, miscellaneous items, gold, anything you like. Rule 2 is that I must have survival mode on at all times and I will not be dropping the game difficulty at any point. So rule 3 and 4 are not exactly rules, just more clarifications really. Rule 3 is that I'm allowed to use shouts in certain situations because the game forces you to do it in order to progress through the main story. And rule 4 is that I'm allowed to use quest given items, things that you need for the main story and cannot avoid getting otherwise in order to progress. You know, things like the Horn of Jurgen windcaller, necessary for story development. That kind of thing's going to be okay. So, we all clear on the rules? Yes? Probably not, no? Okay, let's get started. So to start with, I created a Nordic character and named myself the Artful Dodger because, you know, I'm a pickpocket. Now, I had a choice between Nord and Orc, as Nords do have a hunger resistance, however, I just find the cold resistance more useful. First off, a man got his head cut off, a dragon showed up, and I was on my way. Now, I decided to go with Hadvar because I think his uncle has better supplies that I can steal, although I can't do anything until he cuts these binds off me. So, my first priority was to get some pickpocketed items. However, I cannot pickpocket Hadvar at this time. I also had to drop all of the initial clothing I had as it was not pickpocketed. I also couldn't pickpocket any of the storm cloaks as they were always involved in combat. I couldn't pickpocket the torturers either, so I had to let Hadvar do all of the fighting for me. Right at the end of Helgen Keep, Hadvar gave me a bow and some arrows that I had to drop both of and sneak past the bear to escape. I left Helgen Keep with absolutely no items. Great start. Now, as I've mentioned before, my biggest obstacle here is going to be dealing with the effects of survival mode. My biggest concern for this challenge is going to be hunger, as I can only eat food that I've pickpocketed. And to begin with, my pickpocket skill is absolute trash, so I have to be very careful to quick save after I steal an item from Hadvar. I went straight to the Thief Stone because obviously I'm going to be using stealth skills, and if you're wondering about my combat style,
Stealth Archer.
Now initially I was thinking, you know, obviously all I really need is a sword. Archery's probably not going to be viable because I'll just have to keep stealing arrows. However, I quickly learned that archery was probably the best way to go. But before all that, I'd first need to do a bit of prep work in order to get some supplies together. My first plan was to pickpocket all of the residents of Riverwood. But to put it bluntly, my pickpocket skill sucks. I kept trying to use the old quick save technique where I could steal something from Hadvar and then quick save and then try and steal something else. Now, more often than not, I was actually getting caught. However, I did manage to get a few health potions from him as well as a bow and a few arrows to start with. Now, initially I was peckish and drained and I felt that this might affect my ability to sneak and subsequently pickpocket. So after a couple of attempts, I was able to steal 11 gold and a venison chop from Sven. Delphine had a lot of things that I wanted, such as food, potions and arrows. And through quick saving and repeatedly stealing from her, I got my pickpocket skill up and was able to level up. Every time I level up, I'm pretty much just going to be increasing my health, as I have no use for magicka or stamina. I took the first perk of light fingers from the pickpocket tree. And with things now being 20% easier to pickpocket, I was finding stealing a whole lot easier. Now that I had at least some basic supplies and clothing, I began my journey towards Whiterun, robbing anyone that I could along the way. And the fun didn't stop once I got to Whiterun. I would begin to pickpocket every single NPC that I could find or see. And this is also where I learned that I could get a near infinite supply of arrows from town guards. Of course, I'd have to eat some of the produce that I'd stolen, and this would turn out to be a problem. I could always steal more food, of course, however, the NPCs would not have a replenished supply, so once I stole from them, I didn't think they were going to be giving me any more. I used the stolen gold I'd collected to spend the night in a local inn in Whiterun, where I was able to level up again, and I took the second point from the Light Fingers perk. After I'd continued to rob everyone of everything I physically could, I also decided to join the companions. This would give me access to a free bed. By this point, I'd hit level 4 and was able to take the first perk from the stealth tree, making me 20% harder to detect when sneaking. Then I robbed the Priest of Talos, the Jarl of Whiterun, a couple of guards to get some more arrows, and any other shopkeepers that I could actually get away with. Once I'd hit level 5, I decided to save my perk for the time being, as I didn't have enough skill points in pickpocketing to get what I wanted. Now, I realise that this might all seem a bit tedious and a little bit extreme, but it's all necessary. You see, I had a plan, but in order to enact that plan, I needed some gold, which is why I was robbing literally everyone that I could see. Once I was satisfied that I had enough gold, I headed back to Whiterun, where I got absolutely demolished by some hired thugs. Apparently, not everybody likes to be stolen from. Actually, now that I think about it, that raises a problem. You see, in the Elder Scrolls, the Dark Brotherhood are an illegal organisation. And yes, they work in secret, but if you are caught trying to hire them, you will be in serious trouble. So then, why is it okay for hired thugs to just work in plain sight? Well, after they killed me inside of Uncle Alvar's house, they kind of just disappeared, so I don't know, I got lucky there, I guess. So my plan to get my pickpocket skill and archery as high as possible was to pay for training from a wood elf found in Riverwood called Faendal. I didn't have a lot of gold, but I didn't need it either. All I had to do was pay for training and then pickpocket the gold back. As you can see, this not only skyrockets my pickpocketing skill, but it also increases my archery skill. Now, doing this was going to allow me to level up extremely quickly, which isn't actually a good thing. However, I did need a high archery and pickpocket skill, so I felt like this was the best course of action. I then robbed Uncle Alvar of all his worldly goods before sleeping to hit level 7, where I now had 3 perk points to spend. I chose Night Thief, Cut Purse, and the third perk from Light Fingers. Then it was just a rinse and repeat process with Faendal of training and stealing the money back. This allowed me to hit level 9, where I had 2 perks to spend. I took the first perk of Overdraw, giving my bows 20% more damage. Then after some more free training from Faendal, I was able to hit level 10, where I took the Eagle Eye and Critical Strike perks from the archery tree. For the next stage of my long drawn out master plan, I would have to catch a carriage to Riften. Now this was risky because when you travel using a carriage in survival mode, it will affect your hunger and fatigue, so they got pretty hammered. But I had good reason for coming here. You know the strategy that I employed on Faendal where I got training and then stole the gold back? Well, there's a light armor trainer called Grelka in Riften, and I did the same thing to her. After spending the night at the Winking Skeever, I was able to level up again, where I spent my 4th perk in Light Fingers. I was now near enough unstoppable at pickpocketing. I then went on a mad pickpocketing spree with everyone in Riften, taking lots of gold and food. I was mainly interested in food, as this would be the biggest problem with this challenge. And the gold, the leveling, and the free training just kept pouring in. My pickpocketing skill just kept getting higher and higher. By the time I was finished with Grelka, I was now at level 21. My pickpocketing skill was 100 and my light armor skill was at 51. After a bit more training from Faendal, I decided to head back to Riften because I had an idea that I was going to start getting my smithing skill higher, but I quickly gave up on this. However, the increased training did allow me to level up to level 23. I even wasted one of my perks on steel smithing, but once I realised that I was never going to be able to actually rob enough ingots to do anything with it, I decided that it might actually be time to, start this game. I think I've done enough prep now. So now that I had an archery skill of at least 50, I headed to Bleak Falls Barrow, having gotten the quest from the Jarl after I robbed him. Or before I robbed him. I don't know, it was somewhere around that time anyway. And the bandits outside the burrow were going down fairly easily because I had an inflated archery skill. Although because my level was so high, I was finding higher level bandits as well. I also decided to spend a few of my perks in the archery tree. And you might notice that I'm also level 21. That's because when I realised how badly I messed up with the whole smithing training thing, I decided to reload. So, I don't know, probably shouldn't have even bothered putting that in the video, but, you know, I like people to see my process. So there's a bed right at the start of Bleak Falls Barrow that I would have to use mainly for healing. However, I did level up to level 22. I had planned on using the Draugr to increase my sneaking skill. You see, your sneak skill goes a lot higher when you attack with melee weapons. However, because I'm now level 22, I'm dealing with higher level Draugr, which means I'd primarily have to use my archery skill to deal with them, as that's the only skill I have that will now do significant damage. I do, however, have a perk that will give the chance for the opponent to stagger when hit with arrows. This became invaluable for the rest of the challenge. I did, however, keep trying to hit the Draugr with melee sneak attacks as I wanted my sneak skill high enough to get the backstab perk, giving me 6 times damage with melee sneak attacks. I took down the giant frostbite spider with a couple of arrows. That was simple enough. However, I wasn't able to pickpocket the golden claw. I actually considered the possibility that if I cut Anvil down, I might be able to pickpocket it from him. However, it then just said, this person is busy, so I wasn't able to steal it from him. This is one of those situations where pickpocketing would not be an option. By the time I reached the Draugr Overlord to get the Stone of Bleak Falls Barrow, I had pretty much no health left and resorted to eating what food I have to try and get some back. I felt like I was putting up a reasonably good fight here, but without full health, I was not able to take him out. Also, I ran out of arrows, which was a pretty serious problem. So, in order to heal, I had to run all the way back to the start of Bleak Falls Barrow, sleep in the bedroll, and then return to try and fight him again. My next attempt I was doing reasonably well, but it ultimately ended in my demise yet again. And this is because I feel that not enough NPCs carry potions in this game. Obviously I'm not allowed to use restoration spells. I really could have done with a lot more health potions. Attempt number 3 went a lot better because I decided to just keep away from him this time and just pump him full of arrows. My ability to stagger him meant that he wasn't able to get close enough to me, and I was able to finish him off, taking the Stone of Bleak Falls Barrow. Now, this was an excessively long fight, and obviously I can't show all of it, but it went on for a good 5 minutes. Once I returned to Whiterun, I robbed Irileth of some food and supplies, before reporting to the Jarl. Also, it's worth mentioning at this point that I had crippling gutworm, which made my food 75% less effective. So I'd have to go to the shrine to Talos. I was also able to steal some scaled armour from Rhea from the companions. And finally it was time to deal with the dragon from the Western Watchtower. Now this fight went extremely well thanks to my high archery skill. Of course I'm sure all the Whiterun guards played their part as well. Then after devouring the dragon's soul for sustenance, I headed up to High Hrothgar. Now this was painful because I don't have access to a horse, so I'd have to run all the way there. I was now dealing with higher level enemies than I'd expect to find this early on in the game, but because of my inflated archery skill, I was actually able to deal with enemies such as trolls. Now pay close attention to this part because it's important. I was able to steal some fire arrows from one of the NPCs on the way up to High Hrothgar. Believe me, this will be very important later on. And by later on, I mean right now. I was able to use the fire arrows to take out the ice troll. No, I'm actually joking, I do use the fire arrows for something very important later. The Greybeard shouted at me for being late, gave me a few spelling lessons, and then sent me to retrieve the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller. But first I'd need some supplies, so I headed back to Whiterun to try and pickpocket any NPCs for anything that I could use. I got attacked by some cultists and got absolutely decimated. I actually ended up using a few fire arrows and a couple of potions as well to take these guys out. Now this would hurt a bit later on as I was really struggling for potions, but you know, hindsight's 2020. I was able to steal a couple of items from the Khajiit caravans before heading to Ustengrav. And by the time I got to Ustengrav, my character was actually freezing, making my pickpocket chance 70% less. Luckily, it was relatively warm inside of Ustengrav, so I just had to warm up before continuing. And of course, my plan here was to basically stealth archer my way through this. And it was working really well. Because of my stealth skill and archery, I was able to make it through Ustengrav without any real trouble. Well, that is of course until I got to the giant spiders. They absolutely wrecked me and left me with 1 HP. By this point, the slightest gust of breeze would have killed me. However, I was still able to get the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller. Well, I wasn't, because it wasn't actually there. Luckily, I was able to just make it back to Marthal without being killed, and sleep in a bed for the night to recover my health, at which point I leveled up. I decided to take the Deadly Aim perk because, you know, the whole stealth archer thing. Before heading back to Riverwood, I decided to head towards Solitude for 2 reasons. 1, I'd be able to pickpocket all the NPCs, and 2, I could then get a carriage back to Whiterun. Once I was safely back in Riverwood, I spoke to Delphine. She wanted me to head to a place called Kynesgrove in order to take down a dragon and prove that I'm actually dragonborn. After heading back to Whiterun, I caught a carriage to Windhelm where it was time to fight the dragon at Kynesgrove. Like, I'm not joking, I was getting smacked around like a blow-up doll in a fraternity house. And a big part of the problem here was that Delphine was getting taken down too easily. You see, normally Delphine provides a useful distraction and in truth is actually quite effective at fighting the dragon. And while the dragon's occupied with her, I can shoot him with arrows. Unfortunately though, once Delphine went down, it was pretty much game over very shortly afterwards. So the trick was to attack him while he was occupied with Delphine, at which point I could quick save. That way I knew if I got killed I could just reload from when I was in a good position and try something else. And after a few more attempts I was given a situation where Delphine was actually able to hold herself in combat, giving me enough distraction to take down the dragon. And of course she'd then want me to go all the way back to Riverwood, which would severely deplete my food resources, in order to tell me that I have to go to Solitude. Like, why couldn't she have just told me there and then? It's not like cameras and hidden microphones exist. I don't care how paranoid you are, nobody would have heard her. Naturally, by the time my carriage arrived in Solitude, I was once again extremely hungry. So once again I was wasting more food. I spoke to Malborn the mule and shoved all of my equipment up his ass because that must be where he's keeping it. I've seen enough airport shows to know how these things go down. After I'd given my equipment to Malborn, I slept for the night before heading to Delphine. She gave me party clothes which I have to wear and cannot be pickpocketed. This is one of the few items in this challenge that I'm allowed to use without pickpocketing, as it's necessary for the story development. Once inside the embassy, I recovered all my equipment. Everything read as stolen except for a dagger. I was like, what's going on here? So I dropped it to find that it was actually a stolen dagger, so I don't know what's going on. So I normally find the Thalmor Embassy to be extremely difficult in these challenges due to the limitations that I put on myself, but the brokenness of the stealth archer mechanic made this an absolute cakewalk. I was cutting down enemies for fun and had no problem dealing with the rest of the Thalmor guards. I managed to find the information relating to Esbern and escape to Solitude. Whilst I was in Solitude, I also spent a bit of time pickpocketing arrows from all of the guards. After catching a carriage back to Whiterun, I ran to Riverwood where Delphine told me that I would have to find Esbern, so then it was back to Whiterun to get a carriage to Riften. All of this was very, very food consuming. By this point I had little to no food left and things were really starting to get desperate. I had no real problem dealing with the enemies inside the Ratway and was even able to pickpocket a few of them. This is because I have the stagger perk, which will allow my arrows to temporarily stagger an opponent, meaning that I can actually kill them before they even reach me. I have had trouble in the past getting to Esbern, but because Stealth Archer is so overpowered, the combat's not even worth mentioning. And while I did take some serious damage on the way out, I was able to find a bedroll inside the Ratway to recover my health. I stole as much as I could from the residents of Riften before heading back to Whiterun and subsequently Riverwood. Esbern rambled on about something to do with Alduin's wall. Then I caught a carriage to Markarth where I began to pickpocket all the local residents. I was mainly looking for food as I was running extremely short by this point. I did manage to find enough to keep me going. I also stole a lot of arrows from the town guards. Once I was satisfied that I had adequate supplies, I headed off to Alduin's wall, but unfortunately there is a lot of Forsworn outside of Skyhaven Temple. There's also a dragon which I completely ignored and just ran inside of the cave. There's a lot of Forsworn inside there as well. Thankfully I had Esbern and Delphine. So all in all, the combat wasn't really that bad. There's also beds here, so I can just recover my health by sleeping if I have to. After listening to Esbern ramble on about ancient history, I headed back to Markarth where I robbed some local miners before catching a carriage to Whiterun. Okay, let me tell you, this next part without fast travel or a horse is an absolute nightmare. So first of all, I had to go and speak to the Greybeards and give them the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller. They taught me the Clear Sky Shout in order to meet their master, Parthenax, who lives at the top of the mountain. Now, there are some ice wraiths along the road, and normally I would just ignore these guys, but you see, the thing is, I have to run up and down here a few times, and especially to fight Alduin, I need to be at full fighting strength when I do that, so I really need to take these things out now. I was actually pretty wounded by the time I met Parthenax, but better now than when I have to fight Alduin, I guess. Parthenax informed me that I would need to recover an Elder Scroll in order to learn the Dragonren shout, and I slept in High Hrothgar to recover and also level up. I picked the third perk of Overdraw, giving my bows 60% more damage. After taking a carriage to Winterhold, I robbed some of the local residents for whatever food I could find, before talking to the mages and heading to the cube up north. So I was looking for a crazy old man called Septimus Signius who knew the location of the Elder Scroll. Getting to him was simple enough. Leaving was not. For one, the water is extremely cold, the air is extremely cold, and there are enemies everywhere. Also, when you get colder, your character will get slower, so outrunning enemies is also extremely difficult. Trying to get out of here, I died way more times than I care to mention. By the time I finally did make it back to Winterhold, I was cold and freezing, so I'd have to wait in one of the houses to warm up before heading off. So getting to Alfland was not a fun experience. The cold and enemies were absolutely destroying me. By the time I did get there, I was on extremely low health. However, as you warm up, for whatever reason, you will recover health. I don't know why this is, but I have noticed it before. I also stealth archered my way through this dungeon. However, it did get to a point where I wasn't actually able to fight enemies anymore, like the Thalma for example. I was able to deal with some of the lower level Thalma. However, once I started taking serious damage, without any way to actually recover, I was forced to employ a strategy of just avoidance and running through Blackreach. By the time I got to the end of Blackreach, my health was extremely low. Luckily, there is a bedroll, so I was able to sleep and get all my health back. And at long last, grabbing the Elder Scroll. Now, this took a lot longer than I've shown here because I died so many times, and if I did show every attempt I had here, we'd be here for hours. I made it back to Whiterun and slept at the Companions to recover my health before robbing what little supplies I could from the residents of Whiterun. I also prayed to the Shrine of Talos because I contracted diseases. pickpocketing supplies was now becoming extremely frustrating, as none of the NPCs had anything that I actually wanted. Oh, and I also killed the old orc, because he asked me to. On my way up to High Hrothgar, I came across a Vigilant of Stendarr who had a few health potions that I was able to pickpocket, so that was really lucky. Now, the Alduin fight was as messy as you might expect. I used Dragonrend to get him to the ground, at which point him and Prothanax began fighting. I kept him in place with Dragonrend while I shot him repeatedly with arrows. I used all of my health potions here, and I only had a sliver of health left by the time I actually beat him. To be totally honest, he seemed a lot more concerned with Prothanax than myself, so this gave me a good opportunity to just deal some damage without taking much in return. So it was really lucky that I found the Vigilant of Stendarr to get those health potions when I did. This didn't stop me from dying, of course. However, I was able to save at critical points, allowing me to retry should I fail. But even after I defeated Alduin, I was still in grave danger of dying from the cold. I had a few food items that I could consume to give me just enough health to make it back to the fire inside the courtyard of High Hrothgar. However, compared to what I'd have to do next, I'd take the Alduin fight any day. So ending the Civil War in survival mode is extremely tedious because you don't have fast travel. Basically, I'd have to run down High Hrothgar to Whiterun, speak to Jarl Balgruf, then run back up to the Greybeards to get them to agree to a peace talk to end the Civil War, then run back to Whiterun to catch a carriage to Solitude and Windhelm to talk to General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak. Then I'd have to catch a carriage back to Whiterun and once again run up High Hrothgar, all while consuming a lot of food. I'll be totally honest, during the peace talks I really wasn't paying attention. I was just clicking anything because, well, it doesn't really matter what you do. And once the peace talks were over, there was nothing left to do but capture a dragon and fly to Skuldafn. So upon touching down in Skuldafn, it was painfully obvious that I wasn't able to deal with the enemies here. I didn't have any way of healing and there was just too much going on. Once inside Skuldafn, however, I found it relatively easy to just pick off the enemies before they got close to me. And thanks to all the arrows that I'd stolen from the guards, I wasn't going to run out anytime soon either. I mean, sure, I had a little bit of trouble with the Draugr, but nothing too major. I found that as long as I could actually stop them getting near me, I wouldn't be in too much trouble. I even managed to take down the Draugr White Lord, getting the Ebony Claw. However, by this point I was very close to death. Also, I recently learned that you can actually run into the portal for Sovngarde before the Dragon Priest manages to close it, which is exactly what I did. And remember when I said that the fire arrows were extremely important? Well, this is why. I absolutely needed them to take down Sun. I would not have been able to do this without them. Also, there is nowhere to sleep in Shaw's Hall. You also cannot pickpocket, so I was forced to just complete the final fight with the little health I had left. So I was able to use Dragonrend to bring Alduin to the ground, at which point the heroes of Sovngarde all began to hack away at him. I was able to offer supporting fire with arrows. Sun also got involved, which is something I've never seen before, but he is an absolute powerhouse and I'm sure without his help I might not have been able to do this. But thanks to the combined efforts of all 5 of us, I was finally able to beat the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim using only pickpocketed items. So what can I say about this challenge? Well, for starters, I really enjoyed it. It was so much more fun than I expected it to be. Also, it gave me the chance to use game mechanics that I wouldn't normally use. I will, however, have to apologise for the lateness of this video. I've had a lot going on at the minute and have been unable to continue with filming, but I am getting back into it now, so I am really sorry that it's taken so long. Also, I just want to thank you guys so much for all of your video suggestions. I've received a lot of video suggestions now, which is really cool because it means that I'm not going to run out of content anytime soon. I'm really looking forward to trying all the video suggestions on my list. However, I think my next video I'm going to do something a little different. There's something I've been wanting to do with Skyrim for a very long time. It's going to be a bit of a short one, but it's something I've been really thinking about doing for at least a year now, so I'm going to give it a go, and you guys can let me know what you think. But I'd just like to thank you all so much for watching. Please like, subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave any comments if you do have any, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.